You're listening to Shoe In, covering the ins and outs of all things footwear, from sneakers to heels, loafers to slippers, and every type of shoe in between. Brought to you by the FDRA, the Footwear Industries Association focused on retail, trade, politics, and fashion, helping create and enhance conversations on all things footwear. And now your footwear insiders, Matt Priest and Andy Polk.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Shoe In Show. Matt, I read an article the other day where it said podcasts are hot, and if that's true, this is the hottest footwear business podcast in the universe.
You nailed it, buddy. We've been doing this 5 years, so to all the other podcasts out there, welcome to our party. We've been waiting for you. So come in. The water's warm.
Now, obviously, this podcast is the Footwear Industries podcast, and for that reason, obviously, there's a lot of sneaker podcasts that are focused on fashions and trends and all those things. Our podcast really is about what our industry is doing and how it does it. So it's really the business side, which I'm always most curious about. But of course, there's always a fashion component, because without that, we couldn't sell the shoes if they're not super cool. So of course, Jasmine Pendergrass, our partner in crime, will at the end of the show either tell us a fashion trend happening, or we'll do what you got, what you getting. I don't know what we're going to do yet, which I'm excited about.
Just show me how much pre-production planning we do for these interviews. We have no idea what's going to happen.
Well, I'm really excited today because, we've been talking for, several years now about sustainability. And I would say 3 or 4 years ago, you had companies that are obviously working on this and trying to really focus on that. I think it's really coming to its own now, though, because we actually see product that are not just 1 or 2 pieces of the shoe being sustainably built or eco-friendly built, but the whole shoe now is there's a holistic approach to it. So I'm really excited today to welcome Andrea Paulson with Saucony, and I think her title is Director of Product Engineering. Andrea, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me, guys.
First question is, what is, we have a range of people who listen to this show and may not know what a product engineer is, that we even need an engineer for footwear. So can you just tell us a little bit about your job and what you do day to day at Saucony?
Yeah, of course. A project engineer is a catch-all term. We do everything from 2D, 3D blueprinting. We handle all the bottom unit technical specifications. We'll do additive manufacturing and prototyping. We're handling materials innovation, manufacturing innovation. We're one of the conduits between the USA side product team and the Asia side, mostly Asia for us, development and manufacturing. And it's one of those positions that's category agnostic. So we work on everything from running to, competition shoes to, walking, et cetera. So we'll do a little bit of everything. And, we're along with the product triad, which is the product line manager, the developer, and the designer. We'll work with all of them to move products and projects forward.
Awesome. So you take the ideas and try to bring it to life and show it every step along the way. So you have the hard job of actually saying, well, that might not work, right? So
yes, I've crushed a lot of dreams.
That's all right. Let me ask you something. The reason why we're having you on the show today is because that holistic approach now that we see that brands started to look at sustainability, where in the past we've seen, new processes that are eco-friendly, new materials that we're using here and there. The shoe you guys just came out with, this is the Jazz Court RFG. I've got it in my hands right now. Of course, people can't see it, but I'll describe it. You've got a rubber bottom. It's super flexible. You can bend it in half almost. The insole is wool, 100% wool. It's super thick because I think there's no real midsole, and I think that's telling because as we look at sustainable shoes now, a lot of it's around construction and a lot of it's around these materials, but the upper is textile, it looks like. So maybe just take our viewers through really, really quickly. I think that the biggest selling point or the biggest thing that we see here is zero plastic, right? Mm-hmm. Obviously shoes, we have lots of plastics and we're focused on different aspects of sustainability. Why zero plastics? Why this shoe?
Yeah, excellent questions. Just as an aside, real quick, for those that don't know, RFG stands for Run for Good. Part of our brand manifesto is to provide good performance, good health, good community. So the RFG tagline here is a harken back to our commitment to do what's right and what's good for the runner and the communities they live in. So, Earth is everyone's collective community. I just wanted to explain that for those listening.
Absolutely.
So inspiration-wise, why'd we do it? So many synthetic materials are used in footwear and apparel these days. Things like polyester, nylon, TPU, EVA, all of which are plastic. Means that discarded gear, apparel and footwear, it ends up in landfills, and it takes a long time to go anywhere. And because of that, Saucony has committed to minimizing our footprint by using less virgin plastic, more recycled plastic, and more natural bio content, eco-friendly materials wherever possible. Simply put, it's imperative to adapt and innovate in order to lessen our environmental impacts on the planet. And the Jazz Court RFG is an embodiment of that commitment. So what do I mean when I say innovation? Innovation is a big word, and we apply it to everything and every function. And often when you want to innovate within an arena, even sustainability, you need to set your sights on like the biggest, most audacious goals. And you work and you hash out like the seemingly impossible, definitely improbable goal. You filter down to either failure or a proof of concept. So when we set out to make 100% plastic-free shoe, and honestly, I don't know if anyone realizes how difficult that is to do. So I hope to get into that.
Yeah.
We had serious doubts that it could be achieved. I figured we could fall short and still learn a ton along the way. But to wrap up the project, hitting the goal of using zero plastic throughout the process and only 7 natural materials in the shoe, and to have adjusted so much on the back end, the manufacturing processes for the betterment of energy expenditure, like we're surprised, thrilled, elated, like proud, all at the same time. Like this was our moonshot.
That's great.
Let me ask you this, Andrea. So people wind the clocks back to the Super Bowl 2020, or like right before the world was turned upside down. And what grabbed my attention during that Super Bowl was a Saucony ad of you're used to the Skechers and Tony Romo, you're used to a Nike ad, but a Saucony ad drops in the middle of the Super Bowl. Was that the start of this process? Were you already working on this? Was that the moonshot that we speak of, that you were setting that goal publicly? Talk to us about when this all began.
Oh yeah, that's one of those things that yes, that was our moonshot. Let's just keep it that way. It was our moonshot. We had best of intentions to do a biodegradable shoe, and this is where we ended up from the learnings that we gleaned and along the way. So I really can't elaborate much in terms of like why we had to I don't want to say we dialed back, because we didn't dial back. I think we pivoted. There was an audible called, and this was, I actually think, a better and more reasonable scope for the project.
Yeah, and I think sometimes when we see the sustainability projects, people don't realize when you start jumping into this how difficult it is and how many rabbit holes you go down based even on a material or even on a piece of construction or a process you're trying to change. And somebody's like, I've been doing this for 30 years this way. And you're like, well, we want to try a little something different. So sometimes this is like innovation just as much as it is sustainability. I think they're one and the same in many ways. But, time and time again, we talk to brands and they say we went down this one path and we figured out a better way or a better path. And I think as long as we're heading up the mountain of sustainability and getting up there, we can chart different paths and tack different ways, be very agile getting there.
Definitely.
When I'm looking at this shoe, first of all, what really stands out is the rubber. So you said there's 7 materials in there, and I'm really interested to talk about that. But also, your marketing on your website, I think is really interesting because there's a lot on here, but it talks about 7 renewable eco-friendly materials. But also, you said each step of the process was adapted to reduce energy and avoid chemical use. So you're reducing adhesives, you're trying to take out some of the traditional processes. Tell me a little bit about that. That, to me, in some ways, what we see a lot of in this, what we see a lot in product now is, 1 or 2 materials will be environmentally preferred, much better than previously. You guys took it a step further and you started talking about changing a whole process in manufacturing. Yeah. I mean, that's like a step beyond just an additive here, changing 1 or 2 things here. Like, what was that like? How did that conversation go?
Yeah, there was a lot to unpack there, Andy. Sorry. I think
it always is with me.
Maybe I can go through things like one by one. I'd love to touch upon absolutely everything. So I would say that, speccing the upper was easy. I'm using air quotes here, easy. The linchpin for this project was the bottom unit that you're talking about, the rubber. Rubber units are typically 1-to-1, especially capsule molds like the RFG uses. They're usually vulcanized with sulfur, peroxide, etc., and which means that the crosslinks are formed, right? So the rubber, it helps the rubber harden and solidifies the material. Vulcanization is fine. We use plenty of vulcanized rubber, but the process does lengthen the amount of time it takes for the material to break down and biodegrade. So, especially at end of use. So we found the supplier Lactahevia, and they've been around for a long time, but their process is so unique and so handcrafted that I don't think it's a common intra-industry staple, at least. It wasn't when I started this project, when we started down this path. But the way that Lactahevia makes outsoles is fascinating. Like, they have this, I apologize here. I'm an engineer, so I'm going to get into the weeds a little bit. So I'm going to nerd out a little. They have these half pair molds, almost totally submerged in like a water bath on a heat table, and a giant vat of the Hevea milk, which is liquid latex, right, in the corner. And this is a small factory, right? It's smaller than a basketball court. So a worker will go over and get a hand pitcher of latex, and they'll come back and they'll hand pour the latex into the sprue at the top of the mold. And where it's like let to solidify, again, air quotes there, because solidify, when the mold's cracked open, you have to like carefully remove this like bloated gray jello moldy looking blob, and then slide it into a room temperature bath to dry, right? It's drying in the water bath. And that's because the shrinkage on this stuff is like 30%. It's huge. So from there, the parts are moved onto a screen board and put into a kiln to dry. And this takes a while. But this is a really important part, maybe in the conversation, right? Running a kiln for days on end is not the most energy efficient thing that we can do in the process. But the savings in our materials and the processes and the energy all along the way, in our scorecard, that's still a win, and it was still worth it. So back to the bottom unit, like what starts as white liquid turns into a gray jello jiggler, and then ends up being this beautiful, rich, cinnamon-colored gum rubber outsole, and it's really a beautiful piece that grounds the shoe and is truly the foundation for the whole thing. Without being really punny there unintentionally.
What about the upper material? We often talk about it, and you can say whether it's right or wrong, but it seems like midsole outsoles are the hardest thing to get right when it comes to sustainability. The uppers, we have natural materials that we've been using for a long time, and that seems to be a little bit even with the recyclability and things like that. But the midsole outsoles seem to be really difficult to produce sustainably.
Absolutely. Yeah, apologetically, I tend to dismiss the upper as not being the true challenge, which is not fair at all, right? Like, the upper still stands on its own, and it's still a solid way to build a sustainable footwear. But, you're right. It's the bottom unit that's really clutch. As the marketing copy tells us, like the Jazz Court RFG is made with only 7 natural materials, but technically it's really only made with 5. The beet and the gardenia are dyes that are applied to those materials. So the building materials are cotton and jute weave for the vamp and quarter base mesh, a medium weight cotton canvas for the overlays, so your tip, your iro, your foxing, your heel foxing, and then a lighter weight cotton knit for your lining, a wool felt insert, like you already mentioned, for padding and underfoot, and then lyocell, so wood cellulose, as our laces and the stitching and embroidery for the shoe. So that's cotton, jute, wool, and lyocell in the upper, and rubber in the bottom, and those are all natural and undyed gray goods. Like, that's it. So, the gardenia, when I say gardenia flower, I mean like the plant, not the bloom or the petals. Right. That's been used to make blue dye for a long time, much like the same process of making indigo wood dye. You submerge the cut plant and into an ambient temperature bath, and then you leave it there, and a fermentation process takes hold, and the greenish slurry water turns blue. And the longer you leave it in there, the bluer the water gets, and then you evaporate that down, and you're left with a blue powder dye. So I'm simplifying that some, but that's so we use the gardenia blue to powder dye our collar lining. And when we talk about beet, beet's actually where we had a lot of fun. One of our tech reps called this shoe a garden salad, and I sort of had to chuckle about that, especially when we talk about the size label, which is where the beet is used. Throughout the project, everybody contributed, and to really wild and crazy ideas. The USA team, the Asia team, even our suppliers got in on it. We were crowdsourcing, but we wanted to think outside of the box when we were trying to swap like a traditionally hot melted poly label with an oil-based ink to a cotton label with no oil-based ink. Like, it turned into a home ec class. I'm not making this up. Like, people were grinding berries with mortar and pestle and like trying to make stamps out of it. The Asia team, they were trying to recreate Chinese calligraphy ink using like charcoal and gum arabic. I had the harebrained idea that maybe we'd like stain it with like a grass rub. So in the end, we actually picked the beet juice just because it looked best, and it increased the readability. I don't know if readability is a word, but full circle, I think the upper came out great, and that's a win as the shoe looks good. I know I'm biased, but I keep going back to what our marketing manager for Originals, Jason Faustino, says, and he says it changes your closet, which it gives you something else to pull out of your wardrobe range that's like different and stylish, but still uniquely Saucony. I think that's a great take.
I love that take, and it's uniquely Saucony, and it has a story, right? The story just laid out as one that consumers can grab onto. Let me ask you. You talked about being a liaison between kind of the U.S. team and the Asia team, and we're fortunate enough to have many of Wolverine's factory bases our members. And you don't have to divulge who made this unless you feel comfortable. But what was that like when you come up with these ideas, and then how do you take that to the commercialization side, right? How do you go from the home ec class to the retail outlet, right? And it be functional and looks good and all that. And how does your factory react to the ideas that you're coming up with to bring this project to life?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. There was a lot of explaining because this is still sort of new. I think it's growing traction for obvious reasons, and it should. But we really had to lay out very clear steps, and we had to be really good partners throughout this. The factory was great. As soon as we said, no, we need zero plastic, and we kept going back to SOP documents, so like standard operating procedures, and it was a lot of rinse and repeat. So we would lay out how the shoe was being made, and we'd go, nope, we got to cut this out, we got to remove this. And again, I talk a lot about what we removed from the shoe, and somehow I don't want to make it sound like we're dumbing it down. We're not at all. I hate that term. So again, going back to the SOP and your factory partner, understanding the scope and the project, and then continually going back and seeing if we could do better and do better and do better. It was really interesting. And I've talked about it before, but there's a lot of manufacturing stuff that is just, it just happens and no one really not pays attention to it, but like a consumer doesn't know. They just don't have the visibility to a lot of it. And I would argue that that's where we spent most of the time. Again, from an engineering side, and part of the reason I'm talking to you guys and not someone who can market the shoe better than me is because so much of it was again, off shelf.
Yeah, I like that because I think that's where, again, we've got great material suppliers in our industry who are finding really innovative product that we can add here or there. But when you look at a holistic approach, and I think we're starting, at least when I have conversations now, I'm talking about culture within companies. So I think one key takeaway when you're talking about the crowdsourcing of that innovation and that work, what's great about that is because I think crowdsourcing equals culture. It means that you empower people to think a little bit differently and more eco-consciously and see what they can come up with. But it makes them, it molds them in a way to start thinking that way more long-term. And I'm guessing, based on the learnings you guys had from this shoe, you're going to be able to spread it elsewhere throughout Wolverine. Is that right? Is this kind of, you do a moonshot and you figure out one thing, you start spreading it around a little bit more. Does that mean we're going to see a lot more, product like this across the other lines in Wolverine?
Yeah. Yes. When a product team is building a style, there's a scorecard on the side of our desk and a plus and minus column that, you have to, every decision has to tally tick into. And, this is fairly obvious stuff, but like when sustainability is intertwined with performance metrics, you can get paralyzed, like you're talking about, really, really quickly. Uncertainty takes hold. And, Saucony makes technical running shoes. And, we always put performance at the top of our list, but every performance decision now has to go through this filter of sustainability. Our head of product, Sean Hoy, has been adamant that just because we put performance first doesn't mean that somehow sustainability then comes in second. It means that performance is run through that lens of sustainability, and Saucony will always, under no uncertain terms, do what's right and what's good with our product. So, the filter, we applied a filter to the brief, right? Zero plastic at the beginning of this shoe, but it lended itself to a casual bottom and therefore a non-technical running style. It filtered itself out naturally. But like you said, we taught ourselves a lot about sustainable design, about engineering and manufacturing, packaging, and all the things that come with it. And we'll definitely take those learnings and apply them to running product, that follows similar suit almost immediately. I think I'm allowed to tease that much, right? But it's not to belabor the point, but like our long-term intent is to improve everything. Yeah. And we have our part to play, and the goal is to do less harm. But again, I keep saying sustainability is the journey, and the Jazz Court RFG is a proof of concept for one way of approaching that journey. And there are countless other paths that we can take and we could take, but we're focused on making strides forward and laying foundation for continual progress, cradle to grave. So, we talk a lot about, quote unquote, the way things are made matters as much as the way the things that are in them. Wow, that's not the quote at all. I don't even know what I'm talking about. The way we make things matters as much as what's in them. But specifically, and here's the important part, right? Like, we don't want to make a one and done style. Yeah, we don't. Like, having the Jazz Court RFG sit untethered to anything, in our line makes zero sense. And it's important. We need it to inform and define the line holistically so that every project moving forward is on that sustainability journey and evolving. So yes, right. To answer your question, every footwear style moving forward is going to be filtered and improved, tech down to casual. And I'd be remiss. You have to apologize. I have to apologize to you guys. Like, I'm in footwear, but like, we have an apparel line, and right. like nearly every style contains either recycled or sustainable content already, like the whole line. So they're ahead of us. If I had to give like the marketing bullet points, we're aiming to use up to 100% recycled content for performance materials, textiles, collar lining, shoelaces, and starting in autumn 21, every new performance style will include recycled content. So the goal is to have every shoe hit that mark. But we do have a roadmap with another bold goal that moves us entirely away from virgin plastics by 2024. So
Wow.
that's another moonshot.
That is another moonshot.
But we got to have those. We have to have that. We got to shoot for the stars and take the moon when we can get it, right? Like that was always my grade school teacher was always saying, Andy, you're not trying hard enough. And I was like, I'm giving it all I got, Captain. I can't get it anymore. And she goes, no, you shoot for the stars and you take the moon. You don't shoot for the moon and take the atmosphere. And I was like, all right, that makes sense to me. So,
well, I mean, if you look at what Andrea said, if you just did the one-off, it was just the Jazz Court RFG. It's a novelty, right? But if you use the learnings, I mean, do you envision all these learnings are going to go into something like the Endorphin or some of your higher performance models that are kind of cutting edge using old school materials, at least from a recyclability, sustainability perspective? Do you envision this like totally impeding into all your different models?
Yes, to some extent.
Okay.
There are things I can't talk about with you right now, but that are really interesting in terms of material development that we hope to introduce and get out there sooner than later. Again, because it's no good sitting locked behind an R&D door. I think folks also need to understand like this shoe is great. Like it's going to be a great summer shoe that I'm going to wear because it's super breathable. And when we talk about this, and Matt and I constantly say this, a consumer looks at this and they say, that looks really good. The price is right. It's comfortable. It breathes. Oh, and it's good for the environment. I like that too. Check, right? So we got to hit all those checks. It's not just that we're making sustainable footwear just to make sustainable footwear. It's still got to meet all those specs and all those customer needs. But in the same way, this shoe, and I call them brunch shoes for lack of a better term, but these casual shoes, when you start talking about performance and the need for it to constantly hit the pavement and bounce back up and keep going for miles and miles and miles, I think that's why when we're looking at sustainability, from our perspective of FDRA, it's like we're trying to help people where we can and spread around best practices and help people benchmark and help people prevent blind spots. So I call it the BBB, right? So it's like, what are the blind spots out there that other people have had that they can share? So on our working group calls, we talk a lot about this, but it is extremely difficult. And you take what you can learn from another brand, like what Saucony's done, and you try to apply what you can apply. You may not apply everything, but I think bit by bit, the industry is getting better. They're flexing those muscles so that one day we can be Arnold Schwarzeneggers of sustainability. But in the meantime, we're in the gym lifting right now, right? We're lifting this. But this I love because it's so timely too, Andrea, because I don't know if many people saw it a little ways back, not that long ago, but John Oliver did a whole segment on plastics. Yeah, I saw it. It was great.
Yeah, and the inability to recycle it. And he said it's not your fault as a consumer. You put it in the recycling bin and you expect it to get recycled and it goes to the waste management and they don't have the capacity or infrastructure to actually recycle the plastic. So much of it goes into the landfill, which means like the plastic push on this and other things is so much more meaningful. Knowing that, if you can take the plastics out at the start, it's not going in to the landfill at the end of the day, however long the shoe lasts in terms of durability. So
no, I agree with you. What you said about blind spots is so important. I think, there's so much that the consumer doesn't know. And like I said before, like that's just one approach to it. But, the marketing team asked me to write an editorial for this product launch to sort of add like a color commentary for the consumer to describe and explain the details that like we're walking through right now, because again, you don't see it from the shelf. And, behind the scenes look at manufacturing all the way through the sourcing stream and in the manufacturing process, because so much of what we did is not is just not apparent with shoe in hand like you have. And I talked a bunch about it in that editorial about like what we removed in terms of parts and procedures, workers, energy and heat. No hot tunnels, like the conveyor belts and heating ovens for activating primers and cements.
Right.
For sole laying, these are cool processed. We don't have a box toe. We don't have heel counters, so there's no back part molding. There's no embossing. There's no molding. There's no cementing, and that's another one that I feel like doesn't get the appreciation it probably should. Upper materials are cemented together all the time. Uppers and bottoms are cemented together. The rubber is cemented to the EVA. Like there's cement everywhere in a running shoe. And it's a necessary evil, especially with soft materials. But I think it's really important to talk about the fact that this shoe's just held on by a stitch, and that's really cool. No welding, no fusing, no hot melting, no dyes, no paints.
How much of a manufacturing shift or transformation as a percent? Like this shoe, if you made the shoe in 2015 traditionally and you made it in 2021 now, what percent of change do you think happened in terms of operations or the manufacturing? Like 80%? Adjustment, 70%.
Yeah, I mean they've been making up a statistic on the spot, but yeah, I think 70 to 80% is pretty close.
Pretty amazing.
It's actually very little of what we did is new or nascent in approach. Like, if in fact it's the other way around. Most of the solutions that we came up with are from historical practices and like bespoke craftsmanship and small batch production stuff. So, we as an industry, I think we tend to throw automation at problems as a first step solution, which has its place, don't get me wrong. But, we tried to break that mindset with this project and sort of back our way into, what it is. And with that editorial, I had a couple people ask me, are we, this is not patting ourselves on the back at all, but like, are we okay giving that information out? Is this okay in terms of public knowledge and legality? And, perhaps we should have held those cards closer to our chest, but, I personally, and I think the brand supports this as well, like, this isn't IP, guys. Like,
right.
we're if anyone else wants to use beet juice or flour and water to like make a marking paste like for die cuts, like go for it. Like, we're trying to do what's right and what's good, and I'd say transparency of those things fall into that category. So
yeah, that's awesome. This is a conversation you will not get on any other shoe focused podcast. This has been awesome. The other thing you won't get on any other shoe-focused podcast is Jasmine Pendergrass, who is the treasurer. And Jasmine, we want to bring you into the conversation. We don't know what the segment's going to be. You're going to drop that on us, and then off we go. So the floor is yours, Jasmine.
Thank you. So sometimes, I get on here and I talk about some wacky shoe that's been released or some cool partnership, but every now and then we'll get a guest that just makes me so interested in them. And I think first of all, I got so much out of this. I learned a lot. So I appreciate that. This might be like one of my favorite episodes just from you explaining the process. You have like great storytelling. I feel like I was there and a part of the process a little bit. But I'm curious from your fashion side. Like, I read this article recently that was saying 11 questions you need to ask yourself for buying a shoe, and I was reading that article like, I do not ask myself all those questions. If it's good, I go and buy it. If it has a cool story, I buy it too. So I'm curious, with all the experience that you've had from the back end, how do you shop for shoes now? What has your fashion changed since really understanding the process?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm not the most fashion forward person, I don't think. But I would say that durability has dramatically impacted how I purchase anything. And it's not just footwear, but, the longer something lasts, the more sustainable it is. And the focus on having a product that will stay with you, and maybe that changes in fashion, right? Like, you can't always wear a sneaker to a wedding, but you buy things that you spend, and you show your allegiance with your wallet. And I think in the running shoe business, like people, if you're running a lot of miles, you want shoes to last a long time. And again, with fashion, I don't see it as being any different.
Yeah. Also, did you buy a ton of shoes before you got into the industry? Were you someone who just stuck with the same brand and bought the same ones over and over again, like our friend Andy? What was your approach then versus now?
I don't think that I bought that many pairs of shoes, but I think that other people will tell me I'm lying. I played some sports in school, so I like having good equipment. So I would argue that every season I got 2 new pairs of shoes and alternated throughout. So yeah, I would think that you could call me a shoe dog at heart.
Okay, cool. I'll take that. Yeah, kudos to you.
I do think that durability story is really interesting. We're about to launch a shoe sustainability survey for consumers to figure out how they understand sustainability and what it means to them and what their really interests are, because I think it will really help our industry understand, like, if they actually understand the processes or whether they care about it in the marketing language and what we're doing. So I think that'll help us around that. But I think durability is one of those key things. And I think when you talk to consumers and you ask them some of the stuff about sustainability, that's one of the main things that does come up is the durability. How long is it? How long can we keep it out of the landfill? Second life in many ways. And I think that's, maybe we can have you back on and have a conversation about that. But the whole thing about circularity and the difficulties associated with that is unbelievable. And I know everybody is super excited about that. And I love having moonshots. We talked about it today. But man, I've been going down some rabbit holes on that thing. And that in itself is like a complete transformation of our industry, from how we design shoes, how we develop them, how we manufacture them, to even how we take them back from the consumer. So, as we keep going down this journey, I love, Andrea, the work that you guys and the team have done, making a holistic, sustainable shoe, not just one material here or there. And I love those too. And I love the process and the steps. But I love the idea of a moonshot of saying, let's try to do zero plastics. We're going to gain everything that we can out of the grind, because this is a grind. This is hard work that comes to life. And I just hope people appreciate it. And not just that you guys did it, but that it's super cool and comfortable. So great job.
Yeah,
thank you.
You guys.
Thank you so much. I hope I can come back and tell you a little bit about our tech stuff whenever that launches.
That'd be awesome. Love to have you come.
In the meantime, I will be attending your FDRA circularity webinar. So
very cool. There you go. Well, we're as an industry, trade association, business association, we'll continue to have conversations and thought leadership, because I do think just having conversations like this puts little specks in people's minds. It's like, yes, we can do it, right? So part of it is cheering people on. The other part is, again, there's best practices and ways to think a little bit differently. And if we can all do that as an industry, we can all make our footprint greatly reduced together, working together. So, Andrea, thank you so much for joining us today, and for all the work you do on behalf of the industry. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me, guys.
Awesome. Folks, this is Shoe and Show. If you did not know, if you just buzzed all the way to the very end, I hope you go way back to the very beginning, listen to the whole episode. Just kidding. If you want to rate us, we only take 5 stars. That's it. Only 5 stars.
Denied.
You can listen on Shoe. That's right. Tell your friends and family and coworkers about this show. We're on shoeandshow.com. It's our complete catalog of nearly 300 episodes now of industry leaders talking about shoe business trends and shifts and production issues and product. And we're really proud of the work that we've done to bring people in the air to have conversations like this, where you can pull up a chair, just like Jasmine said, and feel like you're there with us as we talk about shoes. in our industry and the workers that are making dynamic products. So we thank you very much for listening week after week. We just saw numbers and we've hit record highs again in 2020 as our listenership grows. So as always, if you have an idea for a guest or a topic you'd like us to discuss, please let us know. Drop us a line on shoeandshow.com. We'd love to do that. And again, on behalf of Matt and Jasmine and Andrea, who joined us today, thank you very much. Shoe-In is out.
Shoe-In has been brought to you by the FDRA, the Footwear Industries Association focused on retail, trade, politics, and fashion, helping create and enhance conversations on all things footwear. For information about FDRA, visit fdra.org.